The agenda? Yes. Brilliant. Right, so we'll move on to public questions. I have no councillor questions. No public questions have been pre-noted. I'll let you off this time, Ben, since you're in training this evening. Is there any member of the public here this evening who would like to ask a question about any of the services we offer here at the Town Council? No. Okay. And just a reminder to anyone that is watching this back or live on the YouTube, that if you'd like to ask a question on any service the Town Council provides, you're more than welcome to contact one of your local councillors or do so by emailing the office at Weymouth Town Council. Moving on to item 7 this evening, which is the CEE plan for Weymouth. We're going to have our development manager, Ben Heath, introduce this item. And I know Councillor Lambert's here to potentially add some input if required. So you're more than welcome, Councillor Lambert, if the debate comes on to join us at the table. Over to you, Ben.
Thank you, Chair. So the purpose of this report is to bring forward the CE plan for Weymouth to determine the immediate priorities and actions and the costs for the present financial year, which will enable the CE working group to progress the work of the plan. So the plan has already gone through the Finance and Governance Committee on the 7th of June and also the full council on the 21st of June, where members both supported it and adopted the plan and requests for £20,000 towards the working group to deliver the plan and also continue to deliver the decarbonisation action plan, which is a plan that's already been put forward and been worked on. But obviously this is subject to the Services Committee also approving the plan and, as we put in the purpose of the report, looking at the immediate priorities and costs. So at full council, the recommendation was that the full council agrees the general direction of travel laid out in the 5-year plan, but delegates to Services Committee to determine the immediate priorities and costs for the present financial year. Within the report, it details the initial 12 action points as the priorities for this year, and in Appendix A, which is the plan, in Part 3, it puts those a little bit more detail around what's in the actual report. Just to put out a few parts that link to the costs, there's only 2 main costs highlighted in those priority actions at present, which is £10,000 towards piloting a CE grant for community actions, and also to continue the active travel around walking and cycling development, which has already started in a previous action, but has been carried forward into the plan. Most of the reason for that is because there's a lot of actions that need further officer time to work up those actions into a full costed point where we can make decisions on exactly which direction we go and what those costs are. So at that point, they can be brought back to services for further debate and make sure that the committee are happy with that direction of travel with those actions. The plan also will link to the neighbourhood plan, so both the cross-cutting objectives and policies. It will also link into the Dorset Council mission statements for their climate plan. And due to the nature of the plan, there will be additions and things added in the plan as that work is continued, as the whole agenda develops over the next 5 years. One of the key things is the category B actions are reliant on partners like Dorset Council in terms of taking a lead, which we partner because of the nature of the responsibility or the sheer size of that area of work. The actions will be monitored and reports brought back through both the Services Committee and then a full report to Council once a year. And obviously on the standing agenda for services, we do a regular CE update as a standing item as well. The CE working group have only requested that £20,000, as I say, because initially there's a lot of officer time, which will be around 4 days a week, between the 2 projects officers, which are already budgeted for in the council's budgets. So that brings me on to the recommendation in the report is for the services to approve the new CE plan for Weymouth and agree the immediate priority actions and obviously the £20,000 cost to progress in this financial year.
Thank you very much, Ben. I'm just looking at Councillor Lamb and Councillor Harris. Have you got anything to add further to that at this point from the CE working group?
No.
Okay. I'm going to open up the floor then. Have I got anyone looking to speak on this item or make any comments? Councillor Nicholson.
Chair, can I just, the only thing that concerns me is we're aiming for 2030, which is a laudable aim, but what seems to be lacking from this is how is this being measured? So every year, how will we know it's being measured that we're getting there? Because it doesn't seem to be anything in there that suggests, well, year one, it'll be this much, year two, etc. So that by year, whatever it is, 2030, we'll be at, say, 95%. And then by then, we should be 100%. You know, this is what worries me. I'd just like to know how it's going to be measured.
Thank you very much, Councillor Nicholson. Ben, would you like to comment on that?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so obviously this plan is looking at wider than our Wayne Town Council actions. This is looking to actually broaden our reach out into the community and hopefully get a number of groups, organisations, businesses on board to take action to reduce the local emissions. In the services in the 20th of September, I think it is, the next services after this one, there's actually a report that I've written that will be coming forward to give a monitoring on the decarbonisation plan, which looks at our own emissions, and that will answer a lot of the questions you just asked around what our emissions are and where we're at on that journey. One of the things in that report, not to sort of jump the gun, is that the report highlights that we won't hit complete net zero by 2030 for a number of reasons, which will be in that report. But this plan gives us a good way of offsetting some of those things that we can't get to zero in a much more positive way and actually engage the community as an offsetting to be able to reduce carbon emissions across the town, rather than just buy into a scheme which may or may not have an emissions reduction.
Well, can I come back on that, Chair? So if we're not going to reach it by 2030, when will we reach it, please?
So in terms of the decarbonisation report, so our emissions, there'll always be an element that we can't reduce to zero just through the scope 3, which is indirect emissions. There's things in there, for instance, the beach waste contract. Those things we cannot control ourselves. We can work on it and lobby and work with contracts and with DC to bring that down from what it currently is, but we'll never get that to zero. Whether it's 2030 or beyond. So all we can do is look at how far we can get it down and then look at other actions that we can offset where there's other ways that we can reduce carbon emissions across the town, and that's where this plan will step in and we can use it as a tool to say, well, if we hadn't done the work plan, these things wouldn't have happened across the town, and actually the amount of carbon that we're able to reduce can offset what we're unable to do through contracts in our scope 3.
Thanks.
Thank you very much, Ben, for that response. I think if I can just add as well, Councillor Nicholson, what we are looking at doing is in the service plans, he's introducing KPIs that are environmental led. So the beach resort team already had a few KPIs in there that would be linked to environmental performance, and we'll look at rolling that out through the rest of the service plans as they're developed in the next 12 months. Anybody else looking to make a comment? Okay, just one point, Ben, if I can pick up on something you said there around offsetting emissions. Is there anything in the plan? I know you're looking at decarbonisation and how we can reduce our offset, but is there anything in the plan with projects what we can do to offset in further ways? So we've already acknowledged there's the elements of our operations that we cannot bring to zero carbon. Is there projects in the plan that we can say we're looking to reduce our positive impacts to offset those ones still negative? I'm just thinking a lot of organisations, you know, say we know that we can't do this, so we're going to have a positive impact on the environment by planting more trees or doing other green initiatives.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. So yeah, the actual whole report is a kind of offset in that way. So as I said, there won't be everything in the plan at this current state, and it will develop over the next 5 years. But things like environmental impacts, like you said, like planting trees, or looking how we manage certain spaces, or it could be helping community groups to with solar schemes, so not something that we necessarily buy, but something we can facilitate actually through those schemes. We can help reduce not only of our emissions through decarbonisation plan, but also through the CE plan wider in terms of the community or an organisation that buys into that and works with us. So there's a number of elements that will offset, and that's why the CE plan can be legitimately looked at as our way of offsetting rather than just buying credits or putting something in which may or may not be anywhere local or actually have a reduction.
Thank you. That's music to my ears, because I know, you know, there are things that this town council do that are very precious to our residents, and appreciated by our residents, such as the sort of armed forces parade, which we know has a carbon impact. But as long as we're aware that some of these things will continue and produce that carbon, but we look to offset in other ways, is, you know, really music to my ears, because we can't stop what we do to reach net zero. We need to think of other ways to balance the emissions still. Anybody else? Okay, do I have anyone wishing to make a proposal on this item on the agenda this evening? Councillor Harris?
I'll propose a recommendation.
Okay, proposed as written in the paper. Do I have a seconder for that proposal? Councillor Haddon-Toft? All those in favour of accepting the proposal, show of hands. Nine, four. Any against or any abstentions? One abstention. Thank you very much, Ben, and thank you to the members of the CE group for bringing this plan as far as it is now, and we look forward, I'm sure I speak for all of us, to see the progress and the updates. Okay, moving on to item 8 on the agenda, which is developing options for this future seafront lighting schemes. Got our property manager, Shane's going to introduce this one, and I know Councillor Wakeling, this is one of the ones you wish to make comment on. So I'll ask Shane to introduce and bring you forward to make your question.
Thank you, Chair. This report seeks committee support in appointing a working group for the development of options and costings for seafront lighting, whilst recommending to the Finance and Governance Committee the ring fencing for reserves to cover the cost of replacing the seafront lighting installations when they reach the end of the lifespan. As set out in the report, the lighting infrastructure generally is performing to a satisfactory standard and has been apparently maintained well by previous and current council. However, there are some assets that have deteriorated because of historic neglect or the impact of the corrosion of coastal environment. The lifespan of the main seafront lighting is between 10 to 15 years. The replacement costs, excluding the laser towers, comes in about £201,000, equaling £13,400 per year of the maximum lifespan. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shane. Councillor Wakeling, would you like to sort of come forward and make your statement and questions?
I asked 2 questions, one of which is less relevant, I've realised when I got the answer. My first question was, obviously the highway lighting is under a PFI contract through Dorset. And I was like, can we not just buy into that contract? Surely there's already somebody coming out with a cherry picker going up the same column. But apparently the answer is no, we cannot. Maybe the officers could explain why we can't, but yeah, I was hoping we could just buy into the existing thing for the payment license. There are some really scary numbers, and I was trying to just work them out in my head. The cost of replacing some of this stuff is frightening. The recommendation before you is to appoint a working group to go and look at these things, and I think we really should go and look at them, is the short answer. We don't want to end up sleepwalking into a 6-digit bill at some stage, and we need to look at rationally at what we've got and what is worth keeping and what isn't. So I think, yeah, your recommendations are, I certainly agree with 2, to get a working group to look at future options. the total cost of replacing it, I worry about already. And maybe that should be moved into two to be looked at for a future determination. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you very much, councillor Wakeman. Shane, you got any response just on that point around the contract? I think it's useful for us to
No,
understand
that's
that.
fine. So the private finance initiative is over 25 years, and it basically started, I sent an email, so it was back in 2006 when it was first taken out. And so back then, the Dorset Council contacted local councils to see if anybody wanted to bring on their private lighting into that scheme, which encourages the maintenance and replacement of the lights over that 25 years. And because obviously they're set in for that 25 years now, you cannot join in. The next time we go in is, I think, is in 2031 or something, roughly something along those lines. But obviously, from speaking to both contractors, they say for the number of lights that we have, it would be beneficial for us as a small council to pay into that amount, because you'd be levelling up their amounts. So it would cost over more than what the actual lights cost to repair and replace. And so they've guided me to say that we're better off doing kind of like a pay-as-you-go scheme where if you need to go up, the technology in LED means that now these new lights that they put on are kind of seen as like put it up and forget it kind of attitude. But my kind of response to that was they did that in the last previous lights, and that's why we ended up having almost to pay for the lights to be fixed in the first place. And so if you offset that 17,000 and you do that over the 15 years, you're better off having that in your own kind of reserves rather than giving more to Dorset Council to part of the PFI system. If that makes sense.
Thank you very much for that response. Okay. Councillor Northern, you wish to make a point on this item agenda?
If you'd like me to speak ahead of everybody else, I'm happy to. I just looked through the list and see the laser tower lighting, and to my mind, it isn't working. It's never worked, and perhaps we shouldn't bother making it work. I understand the cost of removal might be too high, so my suggestion would be that that shouldn't be in the budget if you were planning to put that into the budget. But that's my suggestion to the committee.
I think at the moment, if you look at the recommendations in the paper, we are looking at forming a working group to bring this information back. So I don't really want to debate the detail too much of what that may come out, because I don't want to preempt that. Okay, does any other members of the committee now wish to make a comment on the paper as it is? Councillor Roos.
This is like I think, those who've sat on Wayne for Portland Borough Council, this isn't the first time we've had this come around. So I'm just wondering if it's worth, in any group that's set up, that someone who is from the older council be on that committee, just because they might know historic information that can be really useful, especially when it comes to knowing the different organisations who have contributed funds to getting certain lighting schemes done in the past and that sort of things. It might be really useful.
Yeah, I think you make some fair comments there, Councillor Roos. Anybody else wishing to comment? So the only thing I would like to see added into the recommendation within point 2, I think, is to consider the options and costs, and really clarifying that we'll be looking at external funding within those costs, because I think Councillor Roos really made a valid point there. There are funding streams that can be used for this sort of thing, because lighting is seen as a form of art sometimes, and there are lots of arts funding streams around. So I think Councillor Roos makes a valid point. I think that needs to be captured within recommendation 2 and the brief for the working group, as well as looking at what lights we possibly want, looking what external funding options are available. Anybody else wish to make comment? Okay, do I have a proposal for the item on the agenda? Councillor Toft?
Propose we accept the recommendations.
Accept the recommendations as written in the paper. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Harris? Okay, so we've got a proposer and a seconder. Anybody, shall we go to a vote? All those in favour? That looks unanimous. Is there anyone here tonight on the committee that would look to offer themselves forward for that working group as it stands at the moment? Or do we want to include that on a roundup or an email and open it up to the wider council?
I think wider council.
So we'll ask the assistant town clerk to include that within a roundup. It may be worth a separate email as well. Sometimes things get lost. Brilliant, thank you very much, Shane. Councillor Gray, I think you're up next as we discuss item 9 on the agenda, which is the Promenade Traffic Regulation Order, TRO, thanks a lot for the acronym, and it's the project initiative document. So, Councillor Gray, would you like to introduce the item, please?
Thank you, Chair. I think this bid is trying to achieve something that most of you think is already in place, which is that it's illegal to park on the promenade, but it's not. It never was. And I came across this by accident when incidents around people parking on there and our ability or the ability of Dorset Council or us to instruct Dorset Council to remove people because of safety concerns around pedestrians. So at the moment, there is no traffic regulation order on the promenade. It's not illegal to park there. We do, unless under legislation, it causes obstruction in a way that forces pedestrians to walk in the road. And of course, it's that wide in places that people can park there. Now, we've had a voluntary scheme that the Beach Office has been implementing over a number of years of moving people on. But of course, in recent times, we've had more and more cars parking on there. And the time the beach staff have to try and persuade people to move people on is time that we don't have. So it's not very efficient. There are some safety concerns, particularly down by Alexander Gardens when you get someone parked on pavement down there and people are walking in the road to walk around it. So I started some investigation, long story short. Few months talking to Dorset Council about the most appropriate scheme that could be implemented. So I've done my research, and within the legislation for traffic, it's called a permit parking area. This area is where you must have a stated type of permit. Dorset Council are happy to sanction this scheme and implement it, which means that the Beach Office will issue a permit to somebody who, let's say, is setting up for their business. You know, around March, April time, we get the traders setting up, and that would be perfectly legal. We would issue a permit for a number of days. Charity events, I know bike night would come into it. We could do that. It would be in our control. Where this wins out is if people are parked illegally on there and the beach staff can't get people to move on because they don't have a permit, we can just call Dorset Parking Services and they'll come down and issue a ticket. We don't get the revenue from that ticket, but at least it's a scheme where we can enforce it. Now, there are some legitimate reasons for parking on the promenade and the Beach Office to own these people, but increasingly, dare I say, the car parking charges might have something to do with that, and also, you know, when we fix the lighting, we'll be able to see more people. It seems like a sensible scheme now. Dorset Council will do all of the work for this. I'll write the brief, but they'll do the work in terms of they have to advertise for 28 days. They'll produce the signage. They'll do the mapping. Not got as far as a scheme yet for permits, but we can come up with one. and push this through so that next, probably in the winter and into next year, we can have some sort of parking exclusion scheme in place. That's it.
Thank you very much, councillor Gray, for that oversight of the report and the reasons why. Could I open up to committee now? Anyone wish to make comments? Councillor Nicholson.
Yeah, it sounds like a very good idea, Chair. My only concern is what criteria will we use for giving people a permit? Have we set down some criteria on this? And, you know, what sort of notice would people need to give to get a permit, etc. Just sort of logistical things, really.
Thanks, Councillor Nicholson. So this is something we have discussed prior to the meeting, and we've been in liaison with the resort team as well. So criteria would include, for example, tenants. So before 10 o'clock and after 6 o'clock, or whatever their leases currently permit. We would be extremely strict on this, but we wouldn't just give them out, so they wouldn't be for members of the public. It would be for legitimate reasons. For operators like the RLI, police, don't forget them anyway, but we just work with our stakeholders and our partners. And as part of the consultation, we'd also include them within part of the consultation. So all tenants would get a letter, for example, and they'd have an opportunity to comment on that as well.
Councillor Taylor.
How big a problem is it? I mean, how often are they trying to move vehicles?
Well, I can give you my personal experience. I'll have to ask the beach office, but there's been once when there's been over 30 vehicles in 2 years, down to half a dozen. There were three on the promenade today, and I walked in. Couldn't see a reason why they needed to be there. This all came to light when I tried to help the donkey lady, because she had a trailer which she used to park at, and I said, well, then just park on the slipway. She goes, well, they'll probably ask me to move. And when I checked, she doesn't, and she goes to Logbourne, but if the donkey gets in trouble, she's got to get a trailer from Logbourne to the beach. So it started with that. And then traders who were parking their vans, you know, when we used to do street food, it became, you know, I think we should have some sort of scheme. And it's up to the beach office to administer that and be flexible. So is it a big problem? It's probably, I'm looking in the future, it's going to become more of a problem if we don't have something. We need to start this now, really. I stumbled across it, so it's, you know, we could have done this years ago, but it seems like a sensible idea. I think we're asking for 5,000, which will be the fee to Dorset Council's 3,000. And then we need some money for signage, because they'll produce some signage for us, so that we're really clear and fair and honest with our leaseholders at any events that go on.
Councillor Roos.
Thank you, Chair. Playing devil's advocate here.
Like that.
Yeah, no, not in the way that you think. With parking fees increasing at the moment in the car parks, am I to understand that I could park up on the promenade all day and not have to worry about a ticket?
I think, Councillor Roos, that would cut across the Nolan principles, so you would not be able to, because the beach office would move you on.
Okay, thank you.
I've got one question, and I'm not sure whether or not, David, Councillor, you'll be the best one to answer this, or maybe Charlotte. When we do bike night and we have 4 to 5, several hundred bikes, classic cars, we wouldn't be issuing each one of those a permit. It would just be an exclusion for that event. And that would still be within the rulings of the TRO. We wouldn't have a Dorset Council traffic officer then come down and try and ticket them.
Under the legislation, as we are the holder of the PPA, Parliament Committee Parking Administration, then it would be up to us to issue an exclusion. What Dorset Council have asked me so far is that when we apply for the TRO through this process, that we don't put too many exclusions in, because it makes it difficult to enforce, but we use our permit scheme to exclude or to demolish anybody that's on there. So keeping it as a standard permitted parking area and then issuing permits according to that. So anybody that doesn't have a permit, or we issue an exemption, which we can do under the legislation, then that would be the simplest way. So bike night, any other events that we want to put on would be okay. We would have the power to do that.
But that's okay, 'cause my concern was that I thought, oh, we have to issue a single permit to each vehicle that was allowed to be there. And I thought, how much staff time would that take up? But, no, knowing that we can just put a blanket cover to say this event's there, they've just got a blanket exemption in that area at that time, that's fine.
My suggestion would be to issue a permit to the marshal so that he has control.
Councillor Bell.
Just a quick question. If we did have to call on Dorset to come help us enforce it, do we know they have the capacity and what timeframes be if people move on before they arrive? Does it just disappear or do they follow it up?
Well, you can only issue a parking ticket if you catch somebody. As to whether they have the capacity, we would be the same as everybody else who rings. If you've ever run parking services, I think you've got your answer. They are understaffed at the moment, but it does work. I mean, I've used them a few times. My intent will be, I'm going to ask, I'll show about which officer, but my intent would be that we'd have some sort of service level agreement with Dorset Council through this process. But, you know, if they move, then it's already achieved its aim. So, you know, I'm not here, we don't want to be issuing tickets for the sake of it. If they move on, the beach team will be happy and the safety won't be compromised.
No, I think it's safe to say as well, if you go down to the front on a summer's day, there's quite often enforcement officers around, so that operation working with our resort team and them is already in existence and can be called upon, I'm sure. Anybody else wish to make a comment, or do we have a recommendation to go forward?
I propose it.
Yeah, Councillor Frost, you're proposing it as written in the paper. That the council moves forward with this bid. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Taylor. Okay, all those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. And well done, Councillor Gray, for obviously bringing this forward. I know it's been a
few months. I just wanted to check which officer is likely to be supporting me with communications. I don't mind doing
It would probably be resort manager Will, if not. We can kick it off with both of us to start with, and then I don't think we've also got our amenities manager starting shortly.
That's good. Thank you very much. Thanks, Chair. Good.
right. Away from the beach and into our local green spaces with item 10 on the agenda. And Councillor Northern, I understand you're going to introduce this item.
Thank you, Chair. So, thank you, committee, for looking at this item. It's been put into the agenda at the request of the neighbourhood plan steering group. It's part of the considerations that we're going through. I had hoped that Collins Marsh, who's the deputy chair of the steering group, would come and present this because he's done an awful lot of work on this. And we've got over 40 submissions for local green space to date. What's concerning the committee is only those sites that are actually owned by Weymouth Town Council. So these are assets of Weymouth Town Council. We previously put 6 items up to the committee and they were approved. Those 6 previously approved are White Playing Fields, Rymead Open Space, Douglas Road Play Area, White Gardens, Purbeck Close Green, and Forehill Close Green Space. So those 6 have previously been approved. You can see the list of 12 here. The list is a little bit longer. You could just wind down a little bit. Thank you. So there are 12 sites here that are owned by Weymouth Town Council. And what we're asking, we've written to all the landlords of all the local green spaces, and we're asking this question as owner: do you have an objection to this site going forward to be designated as a local green space? We as a committee, as a steering group, can't make it a local green space, but we can submit it in the neighbourhood plan. And if the examiner and Dorset Council, if the examiner approves it as a local green space, it gets designated. What that means is it's protected from inappropriate development. So it doesn't stop all development, it protects it from inappropriate development. So pick out the example on there of Radipole Park and Gardens. We are planning quite a lot of development in Radipole Park and Gardens, but it's to do with the use of Radipole Park and Gardens. So that sort of development would not be inappropriate, so it would not be blocked. But if you decided in Radipole Park Gardens to build a multiplex cinema because it's good for tourism, you might argue that isn't appropriate use. So this is the sort of thing that local green space protects. If you, as a committee, choose to object to any of these items being designated, then there has to be a reason within the terms of the neighbourhood planning, the national planning policy framework. So you might say it's too big. You might say that there's previously been planning applications on this land. You might say that you might say that you have another intention that will provide a bigger benefit, but you have to be able to justify that to the community. So this is a community initiative through the neighbourhood plan. These sites have been proposed by members of the community, and that's why they're on the list there. Not all the assets of the Weymouth Town Council are on the list. This is the ones where community members have put them forward. So I'm asking the committee to approve these sites going forward in the neighbourhood plan for future designation as local green spaces. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Northam. Councillor Rose.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Northam, just a quick question. I noticed on the list there isn't Greenhill Gardens or Lodmore Country Park. I just wanted to check why they might not be on the list.
Lodmore Country Park is owned by Dorset Council.
No, only part of it. Most of it's Weymouth Town Council.
No, it's leased by Weymouth Town Council part of it. So we've asked the landowner who hasn't objected.
Okay.
Okay, so good question. It gets confusing, doesn't it? Who owns what? The sites which might actually be rejected by the examiner are things like the Bowleys Cove open space, the Noah Gardens and Bingley's Green. And the reason
So
it might
sorry,
be
Councillor
rejected-
Northam, I'm just going to stop you there because you sort of responded to Councillor Rose's point, and I know you're passionate. But I know there's others that are wishing to speak.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, next one to speak. I have to make you be quiet, there's not a list, I do apologise, so I'll come in. Item 12. Areas of Southfield.
Yes.
Now, I can't see anywhere in the report, unless I've missed it here, where those areas are. So I don't feel that I could support that this evening, because having represented Southfield for 7 years prior to all the changes in the council, there are some pockets of land there that I think could be used. Oh, Councillor Harris disagrees already, but there are pockets of land there that could be used for in-building to provide much needed housing. So at this point, if I'm making a recommendation, which I may do shortly, I couldn't support number 12 on the list without actually seeing what areas of Southfield you're actually defining should be marked. Because, you know, in-build, sometimes we go to protect some of our wider open spaces, in-building will need to happen. And I know when we did our neighbourhood walk in Weston that we did potentially look at some pockets of land in the estate that could be useful in building to provide social housing. So without a map to show me which plots you're looking at designating, I don't think I could have such a wide spectrum as areas of Southfield, where every house on the item on the agenda is really pinpointing a location.
That's a really good question and different mosaic of small plots of land. It was developed as a garden village, and we have a map which shows all those bits of land which Weymouth Town Council now owns. And I'm happy to provide that so that you can pick this up as a outside committee meeting later, at a later date, if that's what you wish. We quite like, yeah, that'll do.
Seeing Councillor Harris wants to come in now.
Yes, I think I can answer that in part, in that the areas that were actually potential for housing, Dorset Council kept to themselves anyway. So there's no land that we were given that I would see as potential land that could be developed for housing. That was all kept by Dorset Council. They're actually giving us back one of those pieces to lease, where there used to be a play school, but as it's all designated community space as well, it makes it equally difficult for housing to be developed. The other area, though, that I'd like to know what's happening is the marsh. Isn't that owned by us? Is that another one they kept for themselves? Right, thank you.
So, may I have a bit more information for people? So there is a map in the draft, initial draft of the neighbourhood plan, which identifies all the sites. It doesn't show you the areas, but we now have maps of each individual site. And I just talk about Elm Close briefly. Elm Close has got complex land ownership. It's part owned by Weymouth Town Council and part owned by Dorset Council. So we're only approving the part of Elm Close that is owned by Weymouth Town Council.
Okay, thank you very much. Anybody else? Excellent.
Chair, I mean, if you're unhappy with item 12, should we put an amendment to this that we, for the time being, exclude area item 12 further consultation? Or it does seem a bit vague. You know, I understand there's a map there, but because that's not, we haven't seen.
It was an omission on our part not to submit the map, because that is a more complicated area than the other ones. We know the other areas. It's as defined. It's all the land as defined in our land holding.
Yeah, I think, you know, I do take Councillor Harris's points on board, but I am swearing that I probably will be making the recommendation that we admit areas of Southfield and bring that back to a later committee with a map. Just because, you know, I don't want to vote on something without the information.
I'm happy to provide the map.
But before I do that, Councillor Northam, can you advise if we were having to wait till the next committee for 6 weeks, or slightly over because of the August break, will that impact on the process of the neighbourhood plan?
We as a steering group are looking to make a decision at our, we have a steering group meeting on Monday, and then in 3 weeks' time afterwards, that's when we would be looking to finalise this list. So if you could do it ex-committee in some way, that would be good. As I say, I'm happy to provide a map.
Yeah, I'm personally not keen on taking this process out of the committee because the neighbourhood plan is the community's plan. I think it needs to be open and transparency on these sorts of decisions that are being made. So I wouldn't be keen on saying we're leave that to a group out of the committee process to agree. I'm just going to seek advice here from the town clerk. But is it possible, whilst this map's located, that we defer this item and come back to it? If Councillor Northam says this map is available to us.
Yes, if you give me half an hour, I might be able to dig it out.
As we've not voted on the item, I don't see that being a problem if you're happy to move it down the agenda.
So we can do that with understanding.
Could we perhaps agree the rest of it, and if I can find the map, come back to this?
If we take a vote on the item on the agenda, it does close the item on the agenda, so it's probably best to defer, bring it back at the end of the meeting, and if you manage to find it, then we can make that comment. I'm just keen, I don't want to slow the neighbourhood plan process up, but I'm personally not keen on voting for something that we don't have the information, and I'm picking that up amongst the committee here. So I would almost propose that we defer this item and bring it back in at the end of the agenda with that information if you can provide it.
I'm not able to stay until the end of the meeting, so what I suggest is you park this item we'll come back to it at another meeting.
It's too late.
But
You're saying that's too late to be discussed by your steering group?
we will discuss it at the steering group and we'll form a view. Because if you are objecting, you have to have a reason. And you need to have some time for that. So at the moment, we have objections from Dorset Council on a number of the sites that have been proposed by the neighbourhood plan. That doesn't mean that we're not going to propose them for designation. The examiner is the ultimate decider.
So if you're saying, Councillor Northern, we can't get this information for this meeting, then I will propose that we move forward with locations 1 to 11 as per the agenda, and defer item 12 to the next committee meeting.
Can I second that, Chair? Is that as a proposal?
That's a
I'll second
proposal, yeah. Councillor Nicholson.
As you're changing the proposal from what is on the board.
No, that's the officer's recommendation in the paper.
Because I can vote for the 11, but I can't vote against the 12. So I'm happy to vote for the 11 as you're wanting to happen, but I would like it to be recorded that I'm voting against the 12th, but not the other 11.
So,
Chair,
okay.
could
I also comment?
Sorry, 2 seconds. I'm just going to get some clarification on it. So as far as I'm concerned, the recommendation isn't moved as a recommendation to its proposed and seconded. So what I've just done there is made the recommendation that we accept 1 to 11 on block, if this helps you, Councillor Harris, and then we take 12 separately, and my recommendation is for 12 is to defer to the next meeting. So will we accept 1 to 11, and then 12, we'll take a separate vote on to defer to the next meeting, if that helps you, Councillor Harris.
Thank you very much.
Are you still happy to second that, Councillor Nicholson? I'm just going to check the assistant town clerk, but that's still okay as a motion. It is. So we move forward with that recommendation as substantive. Do I have anyone who wishes to speak to that? Councillor Northern.
The asset committee looked at the South Hill sites as part of the asset working group about 2 years ago. There was a report produced by an outside consultant, and what it concluded was that there was not an opportunity for development on those sites which were owned by Weymouth Town Council. It did conclude that the site adjacent to this that's owned by Dorset Council had potential for development. So when you look at this, you need to take that into account.
Well, that information can come forward when item 12 comes back to the next committee, because again, this is all information that we don't have present that we need to make that information. Anyone wishes to speak to the proposal? Councillor Taylor.
I'm just not totally convinced we're going the right way with this, to be quite honest. I think when the assets were transferred during LGR, I would be extremely surprised if Dorset Council, or Dorset County Council as it was, gave us any asset that was big enough to build a house on, or any number of houses on, whether they're affordable houses or whatever. And having heard what Councillor Harris says, I personally would like to leave the areas at South Hill within the recommendation.
That's fine.
Basically,
I'll take the recommendation separately, sort of the A and B, so we can still discuss those. Anyone else wishing to speak? I'm going to move forward with part 1 of the recommendation, then, which is 1 to 11 as is. So all those in favour of accepting and designating these as green spaces, show of hands. That is unanimous. We then move forward to 12, and the recommendation here is to defer this to a future meeting when information on the land can be provided to the committee.
I'd like to speak to that bit of the motion, please, if I may, Chairman.
Yeah.
I think councillors that you have heard from Councillor Northern, that the asset list that was transferred made it very clear that the bits that are in Southhill, that are in Weymouth, are not suitable for housing, and I can guarantee that the bits that are on the side that are owned by Weymouth Town Council are not able to carry housing because of their other designations.
Thank you very much, Councillor Harris. Anyone else wish to speak to that item?
I can probably get that up, can't I, on Parish Online.
If you can do it on Parish Online, you're quicker than me, and that would be brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah, I kind of feel like we're now in the middle of the vote. We give the options, but we're going to take this now. Councillor
Chair,
Nicholson.
I think that the reason we can't do this now is that if this should have been on the item should be on the agenda with that information prior to this meeting. I don't think we just bring that information in now. I don't think that's the next point of order, Chair. I think we would need to have sight of that. I mean, I'm not against this, but I think as a matter of principle, information needs to come before the committee, before the meeting, so that we can judge it.
Chairman, I don't.
Sorry, Councillor Harris. Is it on a procedural point?
Procedural point, yes.
Okay,
We haven't got any information saying that there's no opposition to any of the others. We've only got the information from yourself that this is not a good suggestion. We haven't got any suggestion that you couldn't build on any of those in the papers. So I don't see what the difference is.
I think Councillor Harris, I did explain during the discussions that my personal view is I can relate to each one of those overall items because it's designating a space. Item 12 is designating a group of spaces. And I think we need the information to make an accurate decision. Going to move forward because we are now there, unless anyone else wishes to speak to this recommendation. So the recommendation is to defer this to the next services committee when it can be brought back with further information detailing the locations of these plots of land. Going to move forward to the vote. Those in favour, show of hands. So that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Those against. 5. For the first time in 3 years, I've got casting votes. And I am going to stick to where I am because I do believe that the information should be here before committee to make that information. So that is deferred to the next agenda of the Services Committee. I do remind anyone though that you can request an additional meeting as per standing orders. So if this does need to be done quicker, that can be done. So contact obviously the town clerk's not here at the moment, but the assistant or the deputy town clerk. Thank you very much. And again, Councillor Norton, do send our thanks to the steering group of the neighbourhood plan for their continued effort and work on this. It is appreciated. Right, moving on to item 11, and we've got one of our senior resort officers here, Charlotte. Is going to introduce the items. So go on forward, Charlotte.
Thank you, Chair. The community events programme for 2023 was initially approved by the Services Committee, but some adjustments are proposed. The event.
Press the button.
Yeah. There we go. Shall I start again? Okay. The community events programme for 2023 was initially approved by the Services Committee, but some adjustments are proposed. The event at Hilborn Park will be replaced with one at Longmore Park due to infrastructure needed, and the event in Sandscote Gardens will be moved to Tumbledown. The revised schedule includes an art-based event at Tumbledown, a nature-related event at Longmore, and a family-friendly event at Bradford Park. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Charlotte. So obviously the committee will be asked to look at these alternative options being given. We have agreed the programme previously, so it's just these two couple of events we're looking at. Would anyone like to make any comments on these? No. Nice easy one. So do I have a proposer? Councillor Roos, seconder, Councillor Tewkesbury, and all that is in favour. Thank you very much. Nice easy one of your first meetings, Charlotte. Well done. Moving on to the Item 12 on the agenda, allotment leases scrutiny. Our green spaces manager is going to come and introduce the item, and then I may bring councillor Taylor to add anything else as a member of the scrutiny group that looked at this. So over to you, Emily.
I realised I didn't use the microphone properly last time. An allotment scrutiny working group was set up to look at how the tenancy agreement, which was revised in 2019, was working, and see if there was any other issues that need to be looked at or any improvements that could be made to the council's allotment service. The full scrutiny report is attached in Appendix 2. Overall, the group agreed that the new tenancy agreements are working well and the service is running smoothly and effectively. However, the following issues were identified and resulting recommendations were made by the scrutiny group. I've already talked briefly about hoses and hose pipes, but the working group agreed that the Green Spaces team should go ahead and alter the taps on the allotments to ensure that hose pipes couldn't be attached to them once the number of dip tanks on the site was sufficient. There's funding for this work will be carried out this winter. Rents were also discussed, and the fact that the current rents don't cover the true cost of the allotment service to the council. They don't cover staff time, pest control, waste removal. And the group also thought the current charges were quite low, and you can see in Appendix 3 the allotment charges for Weymouth Town Council and for the surrounding areas. So it was decided that the full cost of the service was needed to determine what the charges should be. So the recommendation is that the committee agreed to the Green Spaces team reporting back with a full assessment of the cost of the allotment service to the council, with a view to increasing the charges in a measured and sequential way to reflect the true costs of the service to Weymouth Town Council. That was the first recommendation. Concessions were also discussed by the group, and the scrutiny group felt that senior citizens may not necessarily be the most in need of support. And we talked about discounts for those with universal credit, perhaps being a fairer way of applying concessions. However, this would be quite difficult to implement logistically. As the discount is very minor, it's about 150 per 30p per rod, about 150 per fine rod plot. It was decided removing the concession was fairer and would also be easier administratively. So recommendation 2 is that the committee agreed to remove the senior citizens concession for allotment holders. It was also felt that the scrutiny group was really useful to have for the allotment service to review decisions, deal with any complaints that haven't been resolved. So recommendation 3 is that the committee establishes an annual allotment review group comprising of councillors and officers that just meets once a year to touch base and see how everything's going, if there's any other improvements that can be made.
Well, brilliant. Thank you very much, Emily, for a good detailed introduction and outlining the officers and the working group's recommendations. Councillor Taylor, do you have anything to add now as a member of that scrutiny group?
Yes, so just first of all, I'd like to thank Emily for supporting us in this work, and also for Tara before that. A lot of the recommendations we came up with were basically business as usual, but looking at really taking an in-depth look at how we actually do things and whether we want to do any changes to improve the service. And that was one of the things that came out on recommendation C, that we have a review group between councillors and officers, because there's sometimes a disconnect somewhere along the way. It was interesting that there was a question on allotments tonight. And certainly Emily was quite keen that she should have more interaction with councillors. I think the most contentious one is going to be looking at the cost of allotments and how we actually do that longer term. And I think there's another piece of work to be done there, which will need to be done in time for the budget next year. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Taylor, and thank you for your time on this scrutiny, because I think it's been a very worthwhile piece of work, and it was our first scrutiny that we've actually done as a town council, so very well done. Councillor Roos.
I should make a non-pecuniary interest in that one of the organisation I work for actually helps to run one of the allotments at Crebo Lane, which is a really, really positive, can I just say, really, really positive thing. It's a mental health community group that have an allotment, and they've done an awful lot of good down there from what I've seen. So.
Yeah, thank you very much, councillors. I think that's been noted. Councillor Nickinson.
Chair, are we proposing to take A, B and C as one item, or are we going to take them separately? Because I personally can't agree to item B. I think, frankly, that probably senior citizens, because they've got time on their hands, I think probably tend to use or have the ability to use allotments more. And the other thing is that under A, that we are going to have a review of the charges. The reality of it is, I think, that when we come to look at that, the cost of running these allotments, if it was to be to reflect a true cost of it, the likelihood is that the cost of that we make for the allotments is going to be very much increased, because it's almost a loss leader to service we provide. And at that point, if we can't give senior citizens a concession, I think it'd be a very bad thing. So I personally couldn't vote for item B, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Nickinson. I'm happy to take the recommendations individually if it's requested at the point of proposal. Councillor Harris.
Thank you. I'm also wanting to talk about item B. I'm not opposed to the idea that senior citizens should automatically get a discount, but I would like to identify whether there are any groups who would benefit or who would require a discount to make them accessible. Because it's important that we make our allotments accessible to all, and some might need more help, and either from us putting money into something or for giving them the money to be able to put something in for themselves.
Yeah.
So the current discount, not on Crebo Lane, but all the other sites is £1.50 is all the concession is off the yearly rate. So it's absolutely minimal.
Don't mind getting rid of that.
We discussed it's really difficult to implement, because we talked about whether people with universal, we could manage giving people with universal credit, for example. It's hard administratively for us to be getting hold of that information. Absolutely, we want to make allotments accessible for all. We don't want to be excluding anyone, but I don't think the £1.50 on the £32 is going to be the thing to do that.
I totally agree with that, Emily. I'm thinking more of people who are blind, people who have mental disabilities, people who have wheelchairs. We've got to make them able to reach these sites, and it's how we do that. It may be through a grant, it may be through a discount, but it may be that we have to do things to our allotments. But I think it's important that we open it up to all.
Ben, Councillor Harris, I mean, you make a valid point, but I think that is slightly out of the remit of the scrutiny group and what they were looking at. Councillor Taylor, can I just ask you, obviously, that scrutiny, I think it is just out of the remit of the scrutiny, isn't it?
Yeah, yes, it was. We didn't look at accessibility, apart from the fact that we've got several accessible allotments. It was felt that if people needed that specific needs, we had got allotments within the area that they could move to.
Yeah, we have got some allotments that are more accessible than others. If you go out, there's a lot that aren't. There's narrow, steep paths that they aren't easily accessible, but there are some that are alongside the entrances, and those are designated. In terms of mental health, it was interesting because we discussed a request we'd had, didn't we, from someone's doctor, whether they could jump the waiting list to get an allotment because it would improve their mental health, which is an interesting issue as well. And we absolutely recognise the value of allotments to different groups, and maybe something to think about for the next review.
I think Councillor Harris, you touched on some good points, and I mean.
Yes, what I'm proposing is to put a proposal to alter the recommendation for B. I'm sure you're allowed to do that.
So your proposal would be, your amendment would be,
That we change item B to we use any grants or subsidies to ensure that our allotment service is accessible to all.
Can I speak to that?
Getting rid of the grants and using the money that the grants that are used for at the moment.
again, councillor Harris, I think from hearing what our sort of green spaces manager says, it's very, very minimal, and I think we need additional budget lines and funding to do that. So I think having a separate recommendation that we request this piece of work's done under a D, and a report's brought back to committee would probably be slightly better, but I'm going to bring councillor Roos in, who wishes
I
to
was going
speak
to
to that.
say, you could save a lot of administration if you did it on referral. So if you went through a referral system, which means that through organisations like myself, Dorset Mind, you have a lot of organisations who work, it could be Active Dorset, it could be doctors, it could be social prescribers, whoever you go through, if they say, we're working with this person, we know their financial situation, we know their living situation, therefore we've already done the administration for you. So we could do a referral system where we go, this is the person, this is their situation, would they be eligible for a specific discount or set up a deal that could be beneficial to, it saves you that administration of having to do the whole benefits checking and everything else with people, when there are so many organisations, ourselves, the Lantern, who are already doing all of that. So.
Councillor Nicholson.
I mean, yeah, the problem with that is that when we come to the budget setting process where we're going to decide what the charges should be, unless we have an indication of how many people are going to be entitled to some sort of discount or help with it, it's going to be impossible to cost this, because we could end up with nearly everybody on the allotments having some sort of discount, and we get no revenue at all. So I think we've got to be careful how we do this, because as I say, at budget setting, we're going to need to work out what the true costs of the service are and reflect that in the income. And it's going to be awfully difficult if we don't know who's going to get a discount and who isn't.
Councillor Kanji.
I would suggest leave it as it is. Don't waste your time. It's going to cost you more in assessment than trying to get any more income. Just leave it as it is. What's wrong with it? Thank you.
I think councillor Kanji, I think that's what the scrutiny group were sort of tasked to look at, but yes. Okay, councillor Harris, you mentioned that you'd like to make an amendment to the recommendations as printed. We don't have a proposal forward yet, so you can just move that as a proposal rather than a recommendation. Are you still looking to make that, to amend the recommendation B in the paper, or do you want to add it as a D, that a further report comes back about improving accessibilities to our allotments?
I'm happy with what has been put up there.
So councillor Harris, would you like me to remove the first part of B? So do you still want to remove senior citizens concessions?
I'm happy to remove the senior citizens concession for allotment holders, because I agree that there are some senior citizens who can afford allotments quite happily. But I would want to use any grants that are presently available to help subsidise to ensure our allotments are accessible for all. It's part of the recommendation, yes. I'm proposing to amend it.
That's okay, it's just a separate point.
No, it's removing it and using the grants that are used for concessions in a different way.
Can I just say, there isn't a grant for concessions as such, people are just charged £150 less, less 300 odd allotments, so it's about £450.
Right, use any money saved then, rather than grants.
Yeah.
So yeah, just to clarify, then it's so removing you still wish to remove the senior citizen concessions, and the additional income raised from that goes to improving accessibility on allotments.
Yes. That won't be enough, so maybe we need to say to use any money saved to help ensure our allotments are accessible to all.
it won't go that far in making a widening a path or something, a few £100.
But your normal review of the money and everything else will happen. I think that.
I think councillor Harris, before I ask for a second, though, I think it would be better to have that as an item D. So we can remove that, still remove the concessions. Item D would be to look to improve, because when we're looking at item A then at the fees and charges, we could look at increasing fees and charges everywhere to give additional income to fund those projects. At the moment, £450 a year, which is what our green space manager is estimating, it could be slightly more, it could be slightly less, isn't going to go a long way to moving that agenda, and it's a very worthwhile agenda. So I think having that as a D, that we look at improving accessibility through additional fees and charges, to then include the senior citizens £1.50 that will come in, but possibly for other fees and charges, we could look at levying and ring fencing for that sort of project.
Can I come in on that one in as much as I think that removing our senior citizens concession is going to be a situation that is going to cause a lot of upset and will cause a lot of panic and concern for our elderly residents. I'm showing them that we're actually using that money for people more in need possibly than they are, by transferring it to helping start moving in the other direction. So I think the two are connected and not used as separate elements.
Okay, if we have a proposal, do I have a seconder to make that proposal? Councillor Taylor, I'd like to move an amendment to that proposal to introduce item C, is that we take further looks at how we can make the allotments more accessible and grants and funding streams to deliver this project. So that will build on your proposal. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Tewkesbury. That's now taking discussion on the amendment. Any comments on the amendment? Is it, if you got that up on the screen, Sean? So the amendment will be to introduce recommendation D, which is to look at further funding streams and revenue to further the works to make our allotments more accessible to all users.
For all you.
So that's my proposal. Seconded, councillor Tewkesbury, you're happy with that as written? Yeah. Yes. Second that still. Any comments on the amendment? Councillor Bell?
We just add, to make our allotments more accessible and affordable. Then there's the element of accessing it physically.
I think the affordable element, in my opinion, would be looked at as under recommendation A, which is the assessment of fees and charges.
Yeah.
We also need to look at opportunities. It's almost, we need to look at the opportunities for making it more accessible before we look for the funding, because there isn't loads of space to turn into wider paths, and we can raise beds, but it's really an assessment of our service to see where opportunities can be found for accessibility before you then search for the funding sources. Rolling off the tongue in a nice sentence, but before you find the funding sources to implement those changes in a way.
Okay, any other comments on that amendment? So voting just currently on the amendment, councillor.
Sorry, Chair, are we voting on D now? I'm just getting confused on this because I
This is the amendment, so effectively, yes, it's to include D in the substantive.
Well, it all seems terribly vague to me, because at the end of the day, the only place we're going to get this money from is to put the charges up overall through allotments and then some way allocate some of that money to, you know.
Not necessarily for budget setting, grants, things out there. Emily, did you want to come in?
There is sometimes, I know Tumbledown managed to get some money to raise beds, haven't they? So there is funding available around Councillor Bruce about adult mental health at the moment, there seems to be quite a bit of funding around.
Got to be very careful, I think, when it comes to mental health. The funding that will be put in a pot will be specifically for mental health. A lot of organisations will turn around to you and say, you are the people who are owning those plots of land. You are the people who have that umbrella. You therefore have to go and ask for that grant money or that
I think
funding.
without pinpointing specific plots, I think we've established that there are funds available and grant
But
schemes
it's-
available. So this recommendation will give the officers the capacity to go out and do that as
Yeah.
under the instruction from committee. Councillor Roos.
Could I just adjust it slightly to using the word equitable? Equity is about equality and diversity and covering the whole of accessibility to gender, to finances. It covers literally everything. So I wonder if just using the word to make our allotments equitable means that you can investigate and explore a whole range of ways to make it accessible to all.
I'm happy to tweak that minor word, just checking with councillor Tewkesbury.
Yeah, I'm happy, sorry.
Yeah, well noted, no, thank you. Okay, unless there's anything other further, so at the moment, we're just voting on to include D within the recommendation. Do I have I've proposed myself, seconded by councillor Tewkesbury, all those in favour? That's unanimous. D now becomes part of the substantive, which councillor Harris has also tweaked the written recommendation, but now part of the substantive. Do I have a proposer? Councillor Taylor, seconder. Councillor Tewkesbury again. To be clear, we are now voting as written up on the boards. All those in favour, show of hands. 8-4, those against? 1, any abstentions? 1. That's carried. You've got a bit more work to do, haven't you?
Yes.
No, well done. And, thank you to the scrutiny group and yourself, Emily, for bringing this piece of work in. Moving on to item 13, back to the our public spaces protection orders. So we have noted already here, there's a few dispensations been granted. Going to hand over to our assistant town clerk, Charmaine Denny, to introduce the item.
Thank you, Chair. As per paper in front of you, Dorset Council are currently out for consultation relating to a new dog-related public spaces protection order. There's a draft and response in the appendix, and following initial discussions with the chairman of the services committee, the detailed responses are in the appendix, and the main changes that we are currently suggesting are that the PSPO is in place for the months of June, July and August only, and only between hours of 7 PM and 9 AM during these months. And that's in relation to the weekend.
Okay, thank you very much. So yeah, that's just our point, clarity, that is those changes only affect the SPO in the beach area. And we were still, the recommendation in the paper that's here is that all other areas stay the same. Councillor Wakeling, you had a comment on this one.
I asked a very, very short question. So the proposal is to allow people to walk the dogs on the beach overnight. And the question I asked the resort team was, at what time do they start the beach cleaning in the morning? And the answer that I was given was 6 AM. One word back, that's fine. That's all I need to know. So that's, I'm a dog, oh, sorry, I better declare I'm a dog owner as well. I have concerns when people walk their dogs at night off lead. You see them, their dog stoops 30, 40 feet away. By the time you've got there, the dogs run off, and in the dark, it's pot luck if they find them, not, if I'm honest. And that does worry me at our beach, because our beach is the jewel in Weymouth. And if the beach cleansing commences at 6 AM, that's really, you've got a chance to clean it at 6 AM, although I rather worry what would happen to a deposit if it went through the rake. It might just get shredded and spread out. So I'm not really in favour of the overnight relaxation. I am a dog owner, but I see enough issues with it. I think personally, I'd say we should just stick to what it is, but yeah, it is blocked out during the summer. There are plenty of places you can exercise a dog in town. We have got one end of the beach, there's an area at the Nove, there's Preston Beach, there's an area at the Marsh. There's two areas in my ward, Bincleaves as well. So in my opinion, the Dodwell, there are sufficient places where you can go and exercise a dog off lead if that's what you want to do. And I think we have previously asked for and achieved a relaxation in the rules. It used to be Easter to October. We've had it relaxed till May till September, which I completely supported. I'm very pleased we supported that. I have reservations about the overnight thing, and I'm not convinced it's a good idea. I think it'd probably be better to keep that block in place overnight, but for your consideration.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wakeling. Anyone else? Councillor Roos?
I have to say I completely agree with Councillor Wakeling, and I am a dog owner. I don't feel comfortable with the idea that dog owners that are irresponsible, and I recognise there are many responsible ones, but I see a lot of the evidence around Bodmore Park and the beach where the dogs are allowed that shows that even with all the will in the world, there are still irresponsible people. I feel like when we want to draw people in as tourists to Weymouth and for them to be able to enjoy the beach, we need to be mindful that the dog owners have designated areas, and that maybe keeping those specific parts that are just for people who don't want to have their dog in that area, or any dog who in that area can have it safely as such. And I think with things like firework night, and lots of firework displays as such, there will be dog owners down there, and I hate the thought of someone's toddler having to run through dog poo that's been left on a firework night. And I have to say, it can be a really tedious and difficult problem in Dorset. I know as a whole, it's quite difficult to get people to pick up their dog poo. But I have to say what I've seen in Weymouth, especially when responsible dog owners are confronting irresponsible dog owners and still get issues, and still find that people refuse adamantly to pick up. I just don't see how they're going to be encouraged to, in the darkness of night, or as the sun's going down, to be mindful of others. It might be a lesson, if that doesn't go through, that people who are irresponsible, it does have a knock-on effect on the responsible dog owners.
Councillor Nicholson?
Yes, I have to agree with Councillor Wakeling and Councillor Roos on this. I don't think it's acceptable at all. I think we should amend that and leave it as it is, Chair. I think it's, there's some toddler running dog mess. It's just not acceptable, maybe. I think it needs to be left as it is.
I'm just going to put a comment across here, and obviously I have declared I'm a dog owner, and I use the beach throughout the winter, and I see how dog owners in the winter very much a community, and they make sure everyone picks up their mess, and if they come across some mess that's not left, it's been left there. I know, for example, I would pick it up myself, and I've seen other dog owners do, because it's a privilege for those months that dog owners don't want to leave. And I'm slightly disappointed that the committee will go, stop a wide range of responsible dog owners for the actions of a minority. And I do think maybe we wouldn't have to pay as much on beach cleansing if we did the same to people. Let's ban them for the beach, for the mess and the nappies that they bury in the sand, is my personal opinion. But we don't, because we want people to come and enjoy our beach. And this is an area of the evening where not many people are on the beach. And we can use that, and we can help our businesses further into the evening, because dog walkers bring a lot to our local economy. And Councillor Wakeling, I think last time we did this, you brought some pictures to us of the beach at different times of the year and showed, look, we impose these restrictions, and then look, for the next 6-7 weeks, the beach is empty. All of our tenants there would have been benefiting from dog owners. walking along, stopping for coffee, and that's that. And obviously as well, walking is good exercise, and to give this opportunity to dog owners in an area such as Malcolm Regis where our open spaces are limited, especially for off-lead walking, I think would be good. And I've had comments and representation from Dog Friendly Social pushing for this because it works in the other areas of the country. Cornwall has blue flag award-winning beaches that still allow dogs on there all year round. Or with these similar sort of restrictions. So, you know, I would like the committee to consider those points really within this debate, because people probably make more mess than animals. That's a comment I'm sure that we can all disagree with, far above the cost. And it's a shame to sort of penalise dog owners and responsible dog owners for the actions of a very small minority, and those responsible ones are. And I think to some of our parks and open spaces, and again, I use the Marsh data, I don't see dog muck, and I think, you know, we don't get, I'm looking at Emily, maybe she has, we don't get too many in these little various complaints, do we?
Yeah, we do, I'm afraid,
Yeah.
around the, I think it's not as bad as it was.
Because, yeah,
Actually, but I know the Cougars have to clear the
on
pitches
the
before the
pitches, yeah.
children play football, the parents have to go and clear, which I think is great.
but it's,
But I don't see loads down at the other end, I guess, in the, yeah.
that's because all the responsible ones walk, because we're allowed to walk there, that's why. But yes, so no, I think, you know, by having, again, by the point by having those rooms, because people already are walking on the beach at night. I'm sure we've all seen, I'm sure, Councillor Rees as a ward member, you've probably had comments on that. And I know dog walkers who say, I walk my dog between 11 and 12 because there's no one out there on the beach. So, you know, people are already doing it, we don't see the issue, we don't see the fouling, and to allow that to encourage more responsible dog walkers in the area to please is I think a good idea. And it's a request that's come forward from our community. That's nothing I do. Councillor Harris.
Can I totally disagree with that, I'm afraid, Chairman? My community in South Hill has said very clearly to me, not only do they not want this sort of timing limit put in, they don't want it only between the 3 months that you're suggesting up there from the town council. They want to see it banned, that area banned for dogs from the April the 1st, so that the Easter holidays are clear, right through until October. So I'm afraid that you haven't got the community on side, you've got the community dog walkers on side. Those of us that don't have dogs don't agree with having dogs on the best part of the beach.
Thank you very much, Councillor Harris. Anybody else? Do I have anyone wishing to make I think to clear this up before we look at the wider submission, I think it's probably worth just clearing this point up. So this is the one amendment that the town council sort of drafted as an amendment to where we are. Ready for this committee to help aid this decision. Do the committee wish to remove that and leave as is? Do we wish to remove it's just the timing element and shorten the period to June, July and August? Do I have a steer from the committee how we want to take this forward? Councillor Roos.
I'm quite happy with the time that we had this year. So from, it was June until the end of September. I feel that's reasonable compromise. I just don't think the evening, 7 PM to 9 AM. Is that correct? 9 AM? So even after we've cleaned the beach, someone can still walk their dog on that area of the beach and allow it to defecate, and we can go and watch our tourists play in it. I know you might not see it, Councillor Hope, but I see it all over Lodmore. If you take a walk tomorrow morning, you will see bright pink across the park where someone has sprayed to highlight all the dog poo. It might be something you're not seeing in your area, but I certainly see it in mine. And can I just say, Lodmore Country Park neighbours the Park District. Malcolm Regis can let their dogs off the lead across the whole of Lodmore Country Park, and it's covered in dog poo. So I would say I don't agree with the 7 PM to 9 AM. We pay a lot of money as taxpayers to have the beach cleaned in the summer, and I'd hate for that money to be wasted for people to then come and allow their dogs to defecate before people even access the beach.
Thank you very much. So you're suggesting we remove timing span?
Yeah.
And which months would you like?
I'm quite happy keeping it that dogs are allowed on all of the beach up until June. And then, is it the end of May that we're allowed on the beaches up until October?
So the current ban is 1st of May to the end of September.
Yeah, well, I'm quite happy with that one.
So we wish to remove the suggested amendment and stay as is.
Yeah.
So the response is the same as last time.
Yeah.
Is there a seconder to that?
I'll second that.
Councillor Tewkesbury. Okay, just on that item there, for general comments, and then we'll take the full response on the whole. Those against, those for?
Is that to remove it, Jen?
To remove it, so effectively that will remove that suggested amendment. That's 9 for, those against. And that means no abstentions, 9 for, 1 against. Now we're going to take the vote on the full submission, unless anyone else has any other comments about anything else in the document.
Can I see what we're voting on, please, Mr. Chairman?
So it's basically the submission as Appendix E as our official submission back to Dorset Council on the consultation.
Which is?
Appendix E is a whole section around dog fouling, dog lead lengths. It was submitted along with agenda dispatch.
Would you like me to vote Councillor Harris? or-
No, I'm just going to vote against it, it's all right.
You'll probably lose a lot of what you were looking to do, Councillor Harris, if you vote against it. Around dogs on leads and parks, gardens, it's got all that sorts of information in it.
Yeah, but it's got the wrong times on the beach, so I can't do it.
You can amend that.
I can't amend it. There's too many dog owners here.
We live in a democracy, Councillor Harris.
Yes, I
You're
know.
welcome to make an amendment. Okay, so the submission as presented in Appendix E, do I have a proposer?
This is the amendment.
This is, yeah, sorry, removing the beach times as just previously removed. To the response as Appendix E, do I have a proposer? Councillor
I'm
Wakeling.
not proposing it. Can we just clarify, is our submission now basically to keep the status quo?
Yes.
That is what we're saying, right?
Yeah.
Thank you.
The times.
No, without the times, without,
No, but you're keeping the status quo for the time.
yeah, for the months. Yeah, I'll propose that.
Thank you, actually, Councillor Roos. Just, I really want to be clear on this as a council, because it's not just times. There's been a lot of discussion on times. We're not just talking about Weymouth Beach, we're talking about our parks, gardens, cemeteries, that are all covered in this PSPO. I kind of get the impression that members don't know what they're voting for. I just don't want us to vote on something that we don't know. So Councillor Rouge, you're saying the submission as per Appendix E, you're wishing to move?
If it's to keep things as the status quo, as it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do I have a seconder? So that is that's going forward. We can.
I'll second it.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Taylor, that's seconded. So the submission as per Appendix E, moved by Councillor Roos, seconded by Councillor Taylor, all those in favour? Five. Those against? And abstaining. That's 2. So that is carried as the town council's official response.
Sorry, David, we're gonna have to deal with the extended time, I'm afraid.
Right. Moving on to item 15. Wait, sorry, 14. Nearly there. Running to the end point, funny though, with the iPad. So item 14 on the agenda is the bench request, and I'm going to ask the assistant town clerk to introduce this one also. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So as per the agenda in front of you, we've had 2 requests as per our bench policy, which we have a bench request from the Services Committee. So we've had 2 requests to install benches. One's been from Councillor Dickinson, who would like to install a bench at close play area. And also we've had a separate submission from Councillor Hope, who would like to install a bench at dog exercise area at the marsh. And what we're asking is for members to agree for officers to seek quotes for the installation of bench in both locations and progresses detailed within the report. As you'll see within the report, we currently have no budget allocated for the benches. So at this time, what I'm suggesting is that we're voting for or recommending that they're placed on a waiting list until budgets become available or until we haven't allocated money for bench requests.
Yes, this is something obviously was alluded to at the last full council when that we don't have a budget line to support this policy currently. There may be pots of money available for certain locations, but it was agreed to take these applications forward currently tonight as this, because we obviously want to see how this policy works before maybe bringing the policy back for further amendments. I'm going to open it up. To make it easy, I'm going to take the Elm Close application first, which was a submission by Councillor Dickinson, and ask for comments and a vote on that, and then I'm going to take the second application after. So then, Councillor Harris.
Can I have clarity on the actual policy? I thought the policy was that we've agreed suggests that we put benches where we are asked to for people who want to have a commemorative bench. Have we got a policy on sticking benches anywhere by anybody?
So unfortunately, as the current policy reads, any benches for anywhere need to come through committee. However, that's why we're asking, we have had a meeting just yesterday actually to look at how we amend that. So actually it's only memorialised benches that come to committee.
Or people, basically.
Yeah, otherwise we're gonna, and that's an admission that we're looking to bring to a future meeting, but we were waiting for a meeting that was taking place yesterday.
Okay, so yeah, the policy at the moment is that any member of the public can request benches on Weymouth Town Council land or DC highways because we're responsible for those. They can be either memorialised to generate the income and cover the costs, or can be placed at additional costs within some budget line as required. So picking up on the application form for from Councillor Dickinson, is there any comments here? And as the town clerk said, there's currently no funding, so this will go on a waiting list. Councillor, Assistant Town Clerk.
When I say no funding, potentially only sat at the back of the room, and we may have some funding available for this particular bench, but we don't have, the problem we have is we don't have thousands of pounds sat in the pot somewhere. So for example, if members or members of the public ask for public benches to go in across the town at our next meeting, how are we going to fund those? Where this particular location, we may have funding for.
So previously, there are, if there's a need for a bench, for example, this is one we looked at in Elm Close playing area, which was asked for, and it would be a nice, it would be a nice addition to the play area, and we talked about picnic bench, which isn't even, I don't think isn't something you can memorialise, but it would sit nicely and be a nice addition to the play area. I've had various other requests as well that haven't come through the system yet that would perhaps need to. So if there's money at the end of the year in the parks materials budget, that does get used for benches where there is a need or the public have requested it, so that kind of thing. Elm Close would be nice, there's a lack of a picnic area in that play area. And if there's any funding available out of the parks budget when we've gone through the silly season, that's the sort of thing we would be looking at doing. Likewise, sorry, you're going to go on to the next one.
Okay, so yes, so there could potentially be funding, but not an immediate budget line to commence the work straight away. So we're asking to place a request from councillor Dickinson for 2 picnic benches to be installed at Elm Close play area. Does the committee have any comments on that application? Councillor Roos.
I think this is an issue as to why I didn't support us taking on the benches, is we've just picked up more work from Dorset Council that we don't have the money for. I just hope that Emily and the team maybe rally up ideas over time on how to gather funds for benches that people might request. I don't know, is that kind of, as Charmaine indicated, memorials, seeing who will fund it?
Councillor Roos, I'm just going to stop because we've discussed the policy. There's a policy in place. This is town council land, not DC.
Yeah.
So we're looking at installing potentially 2 benches on our land.
But we don't have the funds to do it.
Dorset wouldn't have put them on our land anyway, so
Okay.
that.
Okay, right, so different remit, but we don't have the funds to do it. Well, we don't have the funds to do it. I support officers doing whatever they have to do, i.e. put on a back burner, do whatever they have to do until they can afford to do it. It's almost like saying, can I have a PlayStation now? And the parent goes, I haven't got the money. And someone goes, well, I want one. We can't provide people with something. We can't provide them right now. We have to give our officers a chance to find the means to get the money in the first place to put these things out there for people.
And I think that's what the recommendation in the paper is
Yeah,
saying.
so
Is we agree, the principle that the committee agrees, yes, 2 benches would be nice there. Officers would go and look about how they could possibly fund it. But councillor Tewkesbury, then councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. Just to confirm, is it 1 bench or 2? Because in the report, there's a request for a bench installation now close. And then we've also now talking about 2 picnic benches. So is it 1 or 2?
Appendix H is the application from councillor Dickinson.
Yeah.
And it does say 2 additional picnic benches.
In the report, it talks about bench installation. It doesn't talk about benches. So
it would be,
2.
as the recommendation refers back to Appendix H, it would be 2. But we can, as a committee, say that we've approved for 1 as part of our recommendation.
It's also what would be useful going forward with this, if we can have a bit of history, because I'm not 100% sure, so don't quote me. I thought there used to be a bench in that park many, many years ago. So maybe something that's deteriorated and gone and coming back. So I'm happy to go with that. Just want to clarify that point.
No, thank you. I think, this is very much a lesson learning activity. These are, we had one for removal at the last meeting. These are our first for install. We'll take points like this on board to improve the procedure going forward. Emily, did you want to respond?
The only other thing I was going to say is that probably if we found funding, we wouldn't do 2 picnic benches in 1 play area. I would rather do 1 picnic bench in 2 play areas, because I've had another request in a play area. But obviously, if funding could be found to do both, that would be lovely. But if it was coming to end of year spending, we were looking where to put it. Necessarily 2.
Okay, councillor Taylor.
I think I'm losing the plot on this. Surely isn't putting benches in our parks business as usual for the parks department? Why on earth are we getting involved on something that we should be delegating to officers to do at their discretion? Yes, we need memorialised benches and a policy on that, but I can't vote on either of these because I'm aware there's Section 106 money around, and previous parks manager has always said, yes, we need a few benches on the marsh. I can put them on because I've got the money. It shouldn't have to waste committee time with it. Are we going to be coming back and saying we want a tree put in such and such, and well, no, so I can't vote for this because I think this is business as usual.
Yeah, I think councillor Taylor, we're referring our comments back to a policy that's in place. Okay, we voted at council for the policy. We're here tonight to discuss the applications. Do we support these applications?
But there's no reason that we can defer this and say the policy is wrong. We want the policy reviewed before we bring these back.
Absolutely, but that's needs to be a recommendation coming back in here. So is that a recommendation that you want to put both of these on the back burner?
Yes, I'm happy to put that in as a recommendation, pending a review of the benches policy, please.
Okay. Do I have a seconder?
Chair, could I just say, would it be an idea on this to recommend to Finance and Governance that for next year's budget, perhaps we include a line for benches or something like this?
It's business as usual.
Well,
Cuts and that.
It is business as usual, but how do the officers know where to put these benches in? How do and the idea of this process, as we've agreed,
We don't micromanage the council. That's not our job.
is that the process is agreed that this is from members of the public, these are requests from members of the public, supported by councillors, same as like the yellow line policy and everything else, how the council works.
Memorialisation is one thing, but I think this is business as usual and it's totally different.
And the highways element is in that policy, we've got to remember that, we've taken on that responsibility. Yeah. Councillor Bell.
I was just asking for a point of clarity into exactly what you just said. I believe I found the policy in front of me. It talks about highway benches and memorialised benches. Would this fall under those categories?
When you scroll down, the application form isn't clear. Any request for removal, relocation or installation of a bench, it doesn't say what type of bench.
I second what Councillor Taylor has said.
Yeah.
Let's
So
send it
defer
back.
the applications and review the bench policy.
Yeah, I think so.
Who's reviewing the bench policy? Once. Assistant Town Clerk.
Officers are in the process of reviewing bench policy. We've spent a lot of time on this over the last few weeks, months it feels like. And we did have a meeting yesterday with both the officers that are in the room as well. And I think we could review it at officer level and bring back the action.
What timescale would that be?
Next service is in September.
Proposal to defer the two items and review the bench policy. Proposed by councillor Taylor, seconded by councillor Harris. All those in favour? Those against? Because we reviewed it and voted on it in 6 months, I think it goes against standing orders, but yes. And no abstentions, that means. Right. We'll see that one back in September then. Moving on to item 15, the Ironman's 70.3 agreement. Assistant Town Clerk Charmaine to introduce this one.
Thanks, Chair. So the report in front of you is to consider the continuation of the working in kind arrangements with Ironman to deliver the Ironman 70.3 Weymouth and if agreed to extend the current host management agreement for a further year, 2024. After the initial term, the agreement would automatically renew for a further 3 successive 1-year periods. If we did proceed, we would be able to, the break clause for both parties within those 3-year periods. I do believe that members were given a presentation, I think it was back in March, relating to the event. And there's quite a lot of information in there. As you'll see within the report, the agreement is pretty much the same as what it was previously. There are a couple of slight amendments. These include that there would no longer be an opportunity to provide host branded materials for placement by Ironman at the athletes awards ceremony for each event. And also there'd be no opportunity for dignitaries, for example, the mayor, to give out the official prizes at the event. Any questions?
No, just if you could just add a point of clarity in there. So I think you have sought opinions from our mayor and deputy mayor on how they may feel, bearing in mind previous mayors have gone to that event. Can you let us know their views?
I did send an email to both of them from the service pre-meeting, didn't receive a response. I didn't receive a response from the Ironman organisers either to understand why they've removed it.
Councillor Roos.
Sorry. I feel like it's a bit of a shame considering that it's hosted in Weymouth. It'd be nice if we had a dignitary from Weymouth present some awards at the end. Is it something worth just us chasing up a little bit to see if we could change that? Because I just think that it's another part of our promotion of where we live and our history and keeping people interested in what Weymouth is about as much as Ironman. I don't know. Yeah, it seems a bit, I don't know if it's maybe that they think that the dignitaries won't turn up or that there's too much going on. I don't know. It'd be good to have some, feedback there.
I think, that's my view as well. When I first read this paper, I kind of felt, why? It's not a financial cost to them, it's also us to have a dignitary there presenting the medals. And I think, especially somebody at the moment like Councillor Weller, who's been so proactive in promoting all the events she goes to and the social media aspect, it's quite a big selling point to have the mayor there. Councillor Taylor.
I'm just interested, because when I was the mayor, I presented the trophies for this.
Yeah.
It was a big event down at the pavilion.
Are they
So I just
too
wondered
tired
whether
afterwards?
it's changed. Perhaps I did such a good job, they didn't invite anybody.
No, they must have done it last year, yeah? Anne must have done it.
I can't confirm if she did do it or not, but I'm just checking back on my emails, it's 27th of June, but I know that they were at another event, was it out of office, so maybe they organised to pick up on mine. But again, I don't know what's happened across the country, because they hold these events all over the country, so maybe incidents happened elsewhere. I can't comment.
I'm scared the mayor's going to.
Councillor Harris.
Can I suggest an amendment to the report? As a host, it says venue we would receive, and there's 2 bullet points, page 22. No, it's higher up on the page on that. There we are. Look, as a host venue, we would receive event name, web media logos, and then a 3rd bullet point in there, the opportunity for a dignitary or from a member of Weymouth Town Council, from a member of Weymouth Town Council, we could decide on that, but from someone from Weymouth to present some of the awards at the end of the competition. So we should actually have the hosts have as a consequence of.
So effectively, I think Councillor Harris is I think town clerk, assistant town clerk's got something there, just a bit of clarification.
So the clause above is what we've had for the last, many years. So I think it is basically just reinstalling that, is it Councillor Harris, would like to see reinstated?
Yeah.
No, that's all right, yeah.
So obviously this needs to be pushed forward because it's going to full council. So the recommendation here is the committee recommends to the full council to proceed with the host venue extension agreement for 2024 as amended by this committee to include the points that you made. Therefore, we instruct officers to continue those conversations with Ironman, but we don't slow up the process.
Yeah.
And then we'll go to full council to ensure that's done.
And it's all right if we get it through in about 6th of September, is that good?
Proposed by Councillor Harris.
No,
No, yeah, I'll propose it.
Councillor Rose, seconded by
Second.
Councillor Harris. Right. Was there any other comments before we go to a vote? All those in favour? Unanimous. Right, moving on to not item 9, as my chairman's notes say. That's right. Item 16, information items, as per the notification on the email agenda. These are just noting, unless there is any real burning questions, but the information items are there for noting. Got the forward, the actions from previous meeting. Again, nothing urgent there coming from those, and the forward plan. There's no urgent items to be brought up on them. Going to close the meeting at 9:03.